CPA today, where we're discussing all things pedagogy with Mr. Nathan Paredes. Welcome again.
Thank you.
So what is pedagogy?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough word, isn't it? Well, pedagogy is, so we looked in episode 1 about curriculum, and curriculum is a bit about what we're going to include in our teaching, whereas pedagogy is more the how we're going to teach it. So how are we going to deliver the information to our students? So yeah, that's what pedagogy is.
What does inclusive pedagogy look like?
Well, if we look at research from Penny & Co, they suggest that pedagogies of inclusion move away from a sort of deficit-based model and look at more of a strength-based orientation, where they focus on facilitating students rather than directive teaching. They involve students and provide opportunities for them to collaborate together to embrace that personal relevance of their learning. We also discussed in our lecture and our tute about some of the pedagogies that are really up there in inclusive pedagogy. One of these, and we discussed it in the first episode, is critical pedagogy, where it is an approach that encourages students to challenge the assumptions and remove the notion as the teacher's the expert, and they're able to develop their own understanding and develop their own thoughts about things to do with health and PE. Another example of great pedagogy is inquiry-based learning, where students are given a problem or an issue or a task, and they have to work together to critically reflect and then be able to gather the information they need to solve the issue or to solve the problem. Another great pedagogy is collaborative learning, and that's where students join together into groups and facilitate their own learning. The students are involved in working together to gain the knowledge needed and then to, work together to engage in the learning. These pedagogies take a similar approach to the transgressive approach, which we discussed in episode 1, and they suggest that students use their diversity and use their strengths to engage each other in their learning. We also look at Calcott's work where they suggest to use a variety of different pedagogies. This can go from peer teaching to mixed ability groups, which we'll discuss later, to one-on-one instruction, partner work, self-paced activities, so that's including task cards, and creative games, which is a bit of a different alternative pedagogy, but it's a great way for students to engage in some collaborative learning and to create their own games and participate in their own made games. And I'll provide a link to that those activities on the website so that you can go and have a look at and try and implement that as a strategy in your class. So it is important that with these pedagogies that we are delivering it in a way that we're walking the walk. So we're not just telling students to do this or that. We're actually being positive about it and really facilitating their learning and telling them that they have to think critically and really go away and be in charge, be in control of their own learning. We also have to use a variety of different strategies. So we're not just using one of these strategies, we're using them together, okay? So it should suit the knowledge that we're trying to give students. Sometimes it might be more impacting to use peer teaching, then other times it might be more impacting just to do some group work together. So this can be differed to suit the group. We also need to be careful of the language that we use. It's very important that we use in the correct language when we're doing an activity or running a class. We've got to be inclusive with the language we use. So things like we're not saying guys when there's girls around, or just having the right terminology with Indigenous kids or kids from different backgrounds. It's really crucial. With that, we need to understand the our class and the diverse abilities in our class to know what pedagogies we can use for that class. So when you look at a class, you got to see who's in my class, who do I need to cater for, and then you provide the pedagogies that are suitable for that classroom. I also wanted to touch on the way we in activities and in our pedagogy, the way we sort of group our students, and there's a couple ways that can be done. You can randomize it, but there's also on ability groups and heterogeneous groups. So the first is ability groups, and that's a perceived idea of ability by the teacher, and you're placing kids in their group that they sort of perceived ability is at. So you might have students that are more capable in one group, whereas students a bit less capable in another group. This can have some positives, but it also has some negatives that come with it, as some students may not enjoy the group they're in and often will disengage because of that. The second idea is a heterogeneous grouping, which groups students in the perceived mixed abilities. This is where students are encouraged to use their different backgrounds, interests and abilities to learn from each other. So again, this links back to our transgressive approach and our collaborative learning, where students are grouped in different abilities and they're able to bounce off each other and sort of learn collaboratively again. So it's very important that we vary these pedagogies and these strategies in our classroom to suit the diverse needs of our students. Okay.
So is there any examples for practice?
So yeah, I'll give you one example, and we'll say for Indigenous kids, and this can be linked to students with disability or female students or the LGBTQ students. And so I'm going to use Indigenous students for this example, and we'll discuss an activity that can be done with Indigenous students in our classroom. So we're going to say we have a few Indigenous students in our classroom and we really want to engage their cultures in an activity. So there's a really great resource that I'll pop on the website that you can have a look at, and that's a Yolngu resource. And so what we want to do is have our Indigenous students share a bit of their culture with the rest of the class. So they'll pick a game from the Yolngu resource and run the game with their peers. So this will help them to sort of show their culture, and then students are able to get a bit of an idea about their culture and what it involves in the games that they used to play, which will be a great tool to engage Indigenous students and give them the confidence in our curriculum and in the school that they're being seen and they're valuable, their knowledge and cultures are valuable in our lessons. And this can be adapted to students with disability, like I said, and the diverse range of students.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to next session where we will discuss assessment.
Awesome.